The black limousine hit the guardrail at 70 miles per hour, metal shrieking against metal in a shower of sparks that lit up the frozen night like fireworks. Evan Cole watched in horror as the vehicle punched through the barrier and plunged nose first into the black waters of the Hudson River. While dozens of people stood on the bridge filming with their phones, screaming into the darkness, Evan was already running toward the edge. He didn't think about his daughter waiting at home. He didn't think about the cold that would kill him in minutes. He only thought about the person drowning in that sinking metal coffin. One breath. That's all it took to save Isabella Crane's life. One desperate breath that would drag them both into a conspiracy that wanted them dead. If you want to know how a convicted ex-con became the only thing standing between a billionaire heiress and her grave, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The February wind cut through Evan Cole's jacket like it was made of paper. He hunched his shoulders against the cold as he walked along the pedestrian path of the George Washington Bridge, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It was nearly midnight, and he was exhausted from a double shift at the warehouse, lifting, sorting, loading boxes until his back screamed and his hands went numb. But the overtime meant he could finally fix the leak in their apartment ceiling before it got worse. It meant his daughter Maya wouldn't have to sleep with a bucket beside her bed anymore. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with stiff fingers, seeing Maya's name on the screen. "Dad, where are you? You said you'd be home by 11. "I know, baby, I'm sorry, the bus broke down. I'm walking across the bridge now, 20 minutes, tops. It's freezing out there." "I'm tougher than I look." He forced warmth into his voice, though his teeth were starting to chatter. "You finish your homework?" "Hours ago. Dad, you need to get a car." "Working on it. Lock the door behind you. Keep your phone close. I'll be there soon." "Be careful." "Always am." He ended the call and quickened his pace, his work boots thudding against the concrete. Traffic was light at this hour, just the occasional car whooshing past, headlights cutting through the darkness. Most people were smart enough to be inside where it was warm. Most people didn't have to choose between bus fare and groceries. That's when he heard it. The engine roar was too loud, too aggressive for the posted speed limit. Evan turned his head just in time to see the black limousine careening across lanes, swerving wildly like the driver had lost all control. The vehicle's headlights swept across the bridge in chaotic arcs. People on the walkway screamed and pressed themselves against the railing. "Jesus Christ," Evan breathed. The limousine hit the guardrail with a sound like a bomb going off. Metal twisted and shrieked. The barrier that was supposed to keep vehicles on the bridge shattered like it was made of balsa wood. For one horrible suspended moment, the front end of the car hung out over the black water, teetering. Then gravity won. The limousine plunged into the Hudson River. Evan ran toward the gap in the railing, his heart hammering against his ribs. Other people were running too, toward the scene, away from it, pulling out phones to call 911 or to record. The cacophony of voices rose around him. "Oh my God, did you see that? Someone called the police. Is anyone in there?" It went straight through. Evan reached the twisted metal and looked down. The river was at least 80 feet below, maybe more. The limousine's taillights were still visible, glowing red beneath the surface like demon eyes, sinking fast. The water would be maybe 35-40 degrees. Anyone inside had minutes at best. "Someone's got to do something," a woman shrieked. Evan scanned the growing crowd. People were filming. People were crying. No one was moving. "Did anyone call 911? He shouted. "They're on their way," someone yelled back. 5 minutes out." 5 minutes. The car would be on the river bottom in 90 seconds, and whoever was inside would be dead long before emergency services arrived. Evan looked down at the black water again. Every rational cell in his brain was screaming at him to step back, to wait for professionals, to not be an idiot. He thought of Maya waiting for him at home. He thought of his parole officer's warning, "Stay out of trouble, Evan. One more incident and you're done." He thought of the person drowning in that car. "Fuck it," he muttered. Evan kicked off his boots and stripped off his jacket, letting them fall to the concrete. The cold bit into him immediately, even through his clothes. Someone grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? You'll die out there." "Probably," Evan said. and jumped. The fall seemed to last forever. Wind roared in his ears, his stomach lurched into his throat. Then the water hit him like a wall of ice-covered concrete, driving the air from his lungs and shocking every nerve ending in his body simultaneously. The cold was so intense it burned. His muscles seized, his chest constricted. Swim, move, now. Evan forced his limbs to obey, kicking toward where he'd seen the taillights. The current was stronger than he'd expected, trying to drag him downstream. His clothes were already waterlogged, heavy as chains. He couldn't feel his fingers anymore. There. The limousine was sinking fast, nose down, trailing streams of bubbles. The rear window was still above water, but barely. Evan swam harder, fighting through water that felt thick as syrup, his muscles screaming in protest. His lungs burned. His heart felt like it was seizing in his chest. He reached the car just as the rear window went under. Through the glass, he could see a figure slumped in the back seat. A woman, dark hair floating around her pale face, eyes closed. The driver was in the front, head at an unnatural angle against the steering wheel, clearly dead. The rear door was locked. No, 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 Evan gasped, his breath coming in ragged clouds. He hammered on the window with his fist, but it was like punching stone. The car was still sinking, pulling him down with it. The pressure in his ears was building. He looked around desperately. There, a jagged piece of the guardrail had landed in the water nearby, a twisted bar of metal about 2 feet long. Evan grabbed it and surfaced for one more breath before diving down. The car was sinking faster now, already 15 feet under. 20. The water pressure crushed against Evan's eardrums. His vision was starting to tunnel. He raised the metal bar and brought it down against the rear window with every ounce of strength he had left. The first strike did nothing. The second created a spiderweb crack. The third shattered the glass. Water rushed into the car's interior, equalizing the pressure. Evan shoved his way through the broken window, ignoring the glass that sliced his arms and torso, and grabbed the woman. Her seatbelt was still fastened. His numb fingers fumbled with the buckle. Once, twice. Come on, come on! The buckle released. Evan wrapped his arm around the woman's chest and kicked off from the car's interior, hauling her toward the surface. She was dead weight, and he could barely feel his legs anymore. His lungs were on fire. Black spots danced in his vision. The surface seemed impossibly far away. Maya needs you. This woman needs you. Move. Evan kicked harder. They broke the surface together, and Evan gasped in air that hurt like knives in his throat. The woman wasn't breathing. Her lips were blue, her skin white as paper. He adjusted his grip, getting her head above water, and started swimming one arm toward the nearest bank. The current fought him every inch of the way. Help! He screamed toward the bridge, but his voice was weak, swallowed by the wind and distance. He couldn't see if anyone heard him. His limbs were starting to fail, responding slower with each stroke. The cold was winning. The riverbank appeared through the darkness, a concrete embankment maybe 40 yards away. It might as well have been 40 miles. Evan's body was shutting down, his muscles turning to stone. His grip on the woman was slipping. Stay with me, he muttered through chattering teeth, though he didn't know if he was talking to her or himself. Almost there, almost. His hand struck concrete. Somehow, they'd made it. The embankment had a narrow ledge just above the waterline, slick with ice and algae. Evan hooked his elbow over it and hauled the woman up with strength he didn't know he still possessed, laying her flat on the concrete. Then he pulled himself up after her, his arm shaking so badly he almost slid back into the water. She still wasn't breathing. Evan rolled her onto her back, tilted her head, checked her airway. Empty. He pinched her nose, sealed his mouth over hers, and breathed for her. 1 breath. 2. Her chest rose and fell with his exhalations, but nothing else happened. Come on, he growled. Don't you die on me. Not after all this. He positioned his hands over her sternum and started compressions. 30 hard, fast pumps that made his shoulders scream, then back to rescue breaths. 2 more. Nothing. Breathe, damn it! More compressions. His arms felt like rubber. His whole body was shaking uncontrollably from the cold. He could barely see straight anymore. 1 more breath into her lungs. The woman convulsed. Water erupted from her mouth and she rolled onto her side, coughing and gasping and choking. Her eyes fluttered open, dark eyes, wide with terror and confusion. "You're okay," Evan managed through his chattering teeth. "You're safe. You're breathing." She stared at him, still coughing, trying to speak but unable to form words. In the distance, sirens were finally wailing, growing louder. Red and blue lights painted the bridge above them. "Help's coming," Evan said. "Just keep breathing. That's all you have to do." The woman's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her lips moved. "Who? Nobody important," Evan said. The world was starting to spin. His vision was graying at the edges. Just somebody who was walking by. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was the sound of boots running along the embankment and voices shouting that they'd found them. They were alive. "Get the medics down here now." Then there was only cold and quiet and black. Evan woke up to blinding white light and the steady beep of medical equipment. His body felt like it had been run over by a truck, then frozen solid, then thawed out with a blowtorch. Everything hurt. "Dad!" Maya's face appeared above him, her eyes red from crying. She grabbed his hand and squeezed it hard enough to hurt, but Evan didn't mind. Behind her he could see a hospital room, pale green walls, fluorescent lights, a TV mounted in the corner playing the news on mute. "Hey, baby," he croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. "What time is it?" "Almost 9 in the morning. You've been unconscious for 8 hours. They said you had hypothermia and almost drowned," and her voice broke. "Dad, what the hell were you thinking?" "Language," he said automatically, which made her laugh even through her tears. "You jumped off a bridge. Someone needed help. You could have died." "But I didn't." Evan squeezed her hand back. "I'm sorry I scared you." A nurse entered the room, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair pulled back in a bun. She smiled when she saw Evan was awake. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." "That's to be expected. You gave everyone quite a scare." She checked his vitals, making notes on a tablet. "Your core temperature was down to 91 degrees when they brought you in. Another 10 minutes in that water and we'd be having a very different conversation." "The woman," Evan said, "is she—" "Isabella Crane is alive, thanks to you. She's in ICU, but the doctors say she's going to make a full recovery. Her family has been asking about you." Her family. Evan's stomach clenched. He'd seen the limousine. He'd seen the custom interior, the leather seats. "Who is she?" The nurse glanced at the TV and grabbed the remote, unmuting it. Shocking footage shows the moment a Good Samaritan jumped from the George Washington Bridge to save heiress Isabella Crane from her sinking vehicle. The man has been identified as Evan Cole, a warehouse worker from Washington Heights. Ms. Crane, whose family owns Crane Industries, one of the largest. Evan's face filled the screen. It was his parole photo from 2 years ago, the one where he looked angry and defeated and nothing like a hero. The news anchor continued speaking. "Cole's own troubled past. Court records show he served 18 months for assault and—" "Turn it off," Maya said sharply. "Please." The nurse muted the TV again, her expression sympathetic. "The media has been camped outside since the story broke. Hospital security is keeping them at bay, but they're not going anywhere anytime soon." "Great," Evan muttered. "Mr. Cole, there are some people who would like to speak with you. Representatives from the Crane family. They've been here all night." "I don't want money," Evan said immediately. "I didn't do this for a reward." "They understand that, but Ms. Crane herself insisted on thanking you personally. She's asked if you would visit her when you're able." Evan looked at Maya, who shrugged. "It's your call, Dad." He thought about the woman's face when she'd opened her eyes, the confusion, the fear, the desperate grip of her hand on his wrist. He thought about the driver slumped dead over the steering wheel. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'll talk to her." They wheeled him to the ICU 2 hours later, after the doctors cleared him for short trips out of bed. Maya stayed behind in his room, though he could tell she wanted to come with him. A security guard accompanied them, a mountain of a man in a dark suit who looked like he could bench press a car. "Hospital policy," the nurse explained. Ms. Crane's family hired private security for this floor. The ICU was quiet, sterile, and filled with the sound of machines keeping people alive. The security guard led them to a private room at the end of the hall, knocked twice, and pushed the door open. Isabella Crane looked small in the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines. Her dark hair was pulled back from her face, revealing features that were striking even in illness: high cheekbones, full lips, a strong jawline. She was maybe 25, 26 years old. When she saw Evan, her eyes widened. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was hoarse, probably from the intubation. "So are you." Evan maneuvered the wheelchair closer to her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I drowned." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "They tell me I did. For a minute or two. And you brought me back." Evan shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. "Anyone would have done the same." "The news footage suggests otherwise. There were at least 50 people on that bridge. You were the only one who jumped." "Yeah, well," Evan didn't know what to say to that. "I'm glad you're okay." Isabella studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and sharp despite her obvious exhaustion. "They showed me your picture," she said quietly. "The news mentioned your record." "Yeah." Evan's jaw tightened. "That's who I am. Was. I made mistakes, paid for them. I'm trying to do better now." "You saved my life. I don't care about your past. Other people will." "Let them." Isabella shifted in bed, wincing. "Mr. Cole." "Evan. Evan, my family wants to give you a reward, a substantial one. I don't want money. I know. They told me you've already said that 3 times. But please, let me do something. You almost died saving me. You have a daughter who needs you. At least let us help with—" "No." The word came out harder than Evan intended. He softened his tone. "I appreciate it. Really. But people are already digging into my life, looking for angles. If I take money from you, they'll say I did this as some kind of setup. They'll say I staged it, or I'm cashing in, or—" "That's ridiculous." "That's reality." Evan met her eyes. "I jumped because it was the right thing to do. Taking money for it would make it something else. I can't do that." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone looking for 15 minutes of fame, maybe. A payout, something." She shook her head slightly. "Not this. Sorry to disappoint. You didn't." She reached out, and after a moment's hesitation, Evan took her hand. Her grip was weak but steady. "Thank you, Evan. For my life. For not letting me die alone in that water." "You're welcome." They sat in silence for a moment, just the sound of the monitors beeping steadily. Then Isabella's expression changed, something darker crossing her features. "The police were here earlier," she said. "They asked me about the accident. I figured they would. I told them I don't remember much. We were driving back from a charity event in Westchester. I was reading emails in the back seat. Then there was this sound, like someone choking. I looked up and saw Marcus, my driver. He was gasping, clawing at his throat. The car started swerving. That's all I remember before we hit the water." Evan frowned. "He was choking?" "That's what it looked like. The police said he had a heart attack, but Marcus was 42 years old, healthy, no history of heart problems." Isabella's fingers tightened on Evan's hand. Something was wrong. I don't know what, but something felt wrong even before we crashed. "Did you tell the police that?" "They didn't seem interested. They called it a tragic accident and said they'd complete their investigation as a formality." She looked at Evan. "But I've known Marcus for 8 years. He was one of the most careful drivers I've ever met, and heart attacks don't usually start with choking." A cold feeling was spreading through Evan's chest that had nothing to do with hypothermia. "Maybe you should talk to your family," he said. "Have them push for a more thorough investigation." "Maybe." Isabella released his hand and leaned back against her pillows, suddenly looking exhausted. "I'm sorry. You came here to be thanked, not to listen to me spin conspiracy theories. It's not a theory if something really was wrong. I don't even know what I'm saying. The doctors said confusion is normal after oxygen deprivation." She closed her eyes. Thank you for listening anyway. Anytime. Evan started to turn the wheelchair around, then paused. Isabella? Yes? Be careful. If you really think something wasn't right about that crash, trust your instincts. Her eyes opened again, finding his. Why would you say that? Because in my experience, when rich people die in accidents, it's worth asking who benefits. Evan gave her a small, sad smile. Get some rest, and if you need anything, really need anything, the hospital knows how to reach me. He left before she could respond, the security guard falling into step behind his wheelchair. As they made their way back down the sterile white hallway, Evan couldn't shake the image of the driver slumped over the steering wheel, head at that unnatural angle. He'd assumed broken neck from the impact. But what if it had happened before the crash? What if Marcus had been dead before the car even hit the water? The media circus was waiting when they discharged Evan the next afternoon. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions all at once. Maya stuck close to his side as hospital security tried to clear a path to the waiting taxi. Mr. Cole, how does it feel to be a hero? Are you planning to write a book about your experience? What do you say to people who question your motives given your criminal record? Is it true Isabella Crane offered you $1 million? Evan kept his head down and kept walking. Maya's hand found his and squeezed tight. Almost there. Just a few more feet. Mr. Cole, did you know Isabella Crane before the accident? Have you met before? That made him stop. He turned to face the reporter who'd asked, a young guy with slicked back hair and teeth too white to be real. I'd never met Ms. Crane before I pulled her out of the river, Evan said clearly. I didn't know who she was. I just knew someone was drowning. But you have a history of violence. I have a history of making a mistake when I was younger and paying for it. What I don't have is a history of standing around with my phone out while someone dies. Evan's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going home to my daughter. He turned and kept walking, not waiting for follow-up questions. Maya squeezed his hand again. That was pretty badass, Dad, she whispered. That was probably stupid, Evan muttered back, but I'm too tired to care. They made it to the taxi and escaped into the relative quiet of the back seat. The driver recognized Evan immediately. Of course he did. Evan's face had been all over the news for 24 hours straight, but had the good grace not to say anything beyond confirming the address. The ride back to Washington Heights took 30 minutes in afternoon traffic. Evan watched the city pass by outside the window, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 2 days. He thought about the cold water, the sinking car, Isabella's blue lips. He thought about what she'd said about Marcus choking, about her instinct that something was wrong. He thought about the fact that Isabella Crane was worth billions of dollars, and money like that made people do terrible things. You okay, Dad? Maya asked quietly. Yeah, baby, just tired. The school counselor called me into her office yesterday. She wanted to make sure I was processing everything. Maya rolled her eyes. Like I'm traumatized because my dad did something good. What did you tell her? That I was proud of you, that you're the bravest person I know. Maya looked at him, her expression serious beyond her 15 years. But I'm also really glad you're okay. When I got the call that you were in the hospital, I thought, I know. Evan pulled her into a sideways hug. I'm sorry I scared you. It won't happen again. You can't promise that. No, he admitted, but I can promise I'll always try to come home to you. The taxi pulled up in front of their apartment building, a 6-story walk-up that had seen better decades. Evan paid the driver and they climbed out into the February cold. Their apartment was on the 4th floor, and Evan's legs were shaking by the time they reached their door. The doctors had told him to take it easy for a few days, but easy wasn't really an option when you had bills to pay. Inside, the apartment was small but clean. One bedroom that Maya had claimed, a couch that folded out into Evan's bed, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. The ceiling still had that leak in the corner, now patched with duct tape and prayers. But it was home. It was theirs. Evan collapsed onto the couch while Maya went to make tea. His phone, which had been returned to him at the hospital, was blowing up with notifications. Texts from coworkers, messages from people he hadn't talked to in years, friend requests from strangers, voicemails from news producers wanting exclusive interviews. He ignored all of it and called his parole officer. Evan, Sarah Chen answered on the second ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Hey, Sarah. I figured I should check in. You jumped off a bridge. Yeah. Into a frozen river. In my defense, someone was drowning. Evan. He could hear the smile in her voice. You did a good thing. A brave thing. I'm proud of you, but next time you decide to risk your life, maybe give me a heads up first. I'll try to schedule my emergencies more carefully. See that you do. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. When do you go back to work? Monday, if the doctor clears me. Good. Keep your head down, stay out of trouble, and for the love of everything, don't talk to the press without running it by me first. Some of them are going to try to dig up dirt, make you look bad. Already happening. I know. Just stick to the truth. You saved someone's life. That's the story. Don't let them twist it into something else. They talked for a few more minutes before Evan ended the call. Maya brought him tea and a sandwich, then curled up on the other end of the couch with her homework. They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city filtering in through the thin windows. Sirens, car horns, someone's music thumping from a few floors down. Normal. This was normal. This was the life Evan had built after everything fell apart, and it was good enough. Except he couldn't stop thinking about Isabella Crane alone in that hospital room, convinced something was wrong with the accident that had nearly killed her. He couldn't stop thinking about the driver who died too quickly, too conveniently. And he couldn't shake the feeling that pulling Isabella from that river hadn't ended anything. It had only begun it. 3 days passed before Evan's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. The media had gotten hold of his cell somehow, and he'd been fielding calls from reporters and podcast hosts, and even a reality TV producer for the past 72 hours. But something made him swipe to accept. Mr. Cole? The voice was female, professional, and unfamiliar. My name is Catherine Wade. I'm calling on behalf of Isabella Crane. Evan sat up straighter on the couch, muting the basketball game he'd been half watching. Is she okay? She's being discharged from the hospital today, actually. She asked me to contact you. She'd like to meet with you if you're willing. I told her I don't want money. She's aware of that. This isn't about compensation. She has something she needs to discuss with you. Something urgent. There was a pause. She specifically asked me to tell you it's about what you said, about trusting her instincts. The cold feeling from the hospital returned, settling into Evan's gut like a stone. When and where? This evening, if possible. Her apartment. I can send a car for you at 7. Evan glanced at Maya, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, earbuds in. I'll need to arrange for my daughter. Of course, the car will wait as long as you need. After he hung up, Evan called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher who sometimes looked after Maya when Evan had to work late. She agreed immediately, as she always did, refusing payment as she always did. Evan made a mental note to slip some cash into her mailbox anyway. Where are you going? Maya asked when she noticed him getting ready, pulling on his one decent button-down shirt and the blazer he'd worn to his parole hearings. Meeting with Isabella Crane. Maya's eyebrows rose. The billionaire you saved? She's not a billionaire. Her family is. Evan checked himself in the bathroom mirror, trying to smooth down his hair. She wants to talk about something. Dad, be careful. It's just a conversation. With someone who has enough money to make you disappear if they wanted to. Maya's expression was serious. Rich people are different. They play by different rules. Since when did you become so cynical? Since I watched you get dragged through the news for having a criminal record while saving someone's life. She crossed her arms. Just be careful, okay? I will, baby. I promise. The car that arrived at 7 was a town car, sleek and black, driven by a woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as Miss Wade. Catherine Wade turned out to be in her 40s with sharp eyes and an efficient manner that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. Ms. Crane is looking forward to seeing you, she said as they pulled into traffic. What does she want to talk about? She'll explain when you arrive, but Mr. Cole, before we get there, I need to ask you something. Catherine glanced at him in the rearview mirror. The conversation you're about to have, it needs to stay confidential. Can you agree to that? Depends on what we're talking about. Fair enough. Let me put it another way. Isabella trusts you. Given everything that's happened, that's not something she extends easily right now. Please don't make her regret it. They drove through Manhattan as evening descended, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. The apartment building they eventually stopped at was in Tribeca, all glass and steel and doormen in uniforms. Evan felt out of place the moment he stepped out of the car. Catherine led him through a lobby that looked like an art gallery, past security that checked his ID twice, and into an elevator with a fingerprint scanner. They rode up in silence, climbing higher than Evan had ever been in a building before. When the doors finally opened, they opened directly into an apartment. Isabella's apartment. The space was vast and minimalist, all white walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city that made Evan's breath catch. He could see the Hudson from here, the George Washington Bridge in the distance, the lights of New Jersey beyond. The furniture was expensive but sparse. Everything was clean and perfect and utterly impersonal. Isabella was standing by the windows, looking out at the view. She turned when she heard them enter, and Evan was struck by how different she looked from the woman he'd pulled from the river. She was dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, but she wore them like armor. Her dark hair was down, framing her face. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "Evan," she said, and there was genuine relief in her voice. "Thank you for coming. You said it was urgent." "It is. Catherine, could you give us a moment?" Catherine nodded and disappeared through a doorway, leaving them alone. Isabella gestured to a couch near the windows, and Evan sat, feeling the expensive leather give beneath him. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "How are you feeling?" Evan asked. "Better than I have any right to be, thanks to you." She paused. "I heard about the media attention. I'm sorry they're digging into your past." "Not your fault." "Actually, it is. If I died in that river, you'd still be anonymous." She met his eyes. "I wanted to see you because I need help. And before you say anything, I know what I'm asking. I know we barely know each other, but you told me to trust my instincts, and my instincts are screaming that something is very wrong." Evan leaned forward. "What happened?" "The police closed their investigation into the crash. They ruled it accidental death due to sudden cardiac arrest." Isabella's jaw tightened. "But I got the autopsy results. Marcus didn't have a heart attack." "Then what killed him?" "The official cause of death was drowning. He was alive when we hit the water." She pulled out her phone and pulled up a document, handing it to Evan. "But look at this section." The medical examiner noted unusual findings in the toxicology screen. Elevated levels of something called succinylcholine. Evan scanned the report, though most of the medical terminology meant nothing to him. "What is that?" "It's a paralytic agent. Hospitals use it during surgery to prevent muscle movement, but it metabolizes quickly in the body, which makes it almost impossible to detect unless you're specifically looking for it." Isabella's voice was steady, but Evan could hear the fear underneath. Someone who knew what they were doing could use it to paralyze someone while leaving them conscious. Marcus would have felt everything, his muscles seizing, his lungs stopping. He would have been aware right up until he drowned. The room suddenly felt colder. "You're saying someone murdered him?" "I'm saying someone murdered him to get to me. The paralytic would have taken effect while he was driving. He lost control of the car and we crashed. I was supposed to die in that river." Isabella took the phone back, her hands trembling slightly. "But you jumped in. You saved me, and now someone's plan has failed. Did you tell the police about the toxicology results?" "I tried. They said elevated succinylcholine levels can occur naturally in drowning victims, that it's not conclusive evidence of foul play. They said I was traumatized and looking for someone to blame." Her expression hardened. "They're not going to investigate further. Someone is making sure of that. Someone with influence. Someone with money. Someone who benefits if I die." Isabella stood and walked to the windows, hugging herself. "My grandfather built Crane Industries from nothing. When he died 5 years ago, he left controlling interest to me. Not to my Uncle Richard, who'd been running the company. Not to my cousins. To me. Let me guess. Uncle Richard wasn't happy. He was furious. He challenged the will in court and lost. Since then, he's been the CEO while I hold the majority shares, which means I can outvote him on any major decision. It's been a cold war for 5 years." She turned back to face him. If I die without heirs, my shares transfer to my uncle. He gets everything. Evan's mind was racing. Have there been other incidents? Things that seemed like accidents but might not have been? Last year, the brakes failed on my car. I nearly went off a cliff in the Hamptons. The mechanic said it was a manufacturing defect. 3 months ago, I got food poisoning so severe I was hospitalized for a week. They never found the source. Isabella's voice dropped. And 2 weeks before the crash, my previous security chief quit suddenly. No explanation, no notice, just gone. Who hired Marcus? My uncle recommended him. Said he was the best, completely trustworthy. The bitter irony in her voice was sharp enough to cut. I trusted his judgment because I wanted to believe we could move past the inheritance fight. I thought we were family. Evan stood and joined her at the windows, looking out at the city below. From this height, the people looked like ants, the cars like toys. It was easy to forget they were all real, all living their own lives, all struggling with their own problems. Easy to forget that money couldn't protect you from everything. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. Because you're the only person I trust right now. My staff could be compromised. My security could be bought. My family clearly wants me dead, but you... She looked at him. You risked your life for a stranger. You turned down money because you thought it was the right thing to do. You told me to trust my instincts. Isabella, I'm not a bodyguard. I'm not a detective. I'm a warehouse worker with a criminal record who got lucky once. You're someone who sees clearly. Someone who isn't tangled up in my world, who doesn't have a hidden agenda. She reached out and touched his arm. I need someone like that. I need help. Help doing what? Finding proof. Real proof that will make the police listen. Proof that my uncle is trying to kill me. Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. I can pay you. I know you don't want money, but you have a daughter. You should be compensated for your time. If I do this, it's not for money. Then why would you do it? Evan thought about the driver slumped over the wheel, paralyzed and drowning, aware of everything. He thought about someone planning that, executing it, being willing to kill an innocent man just to get to Isabella. He thought about the cold calculation it took to murder your own niece for money. Because it's the right thing to do, he said, and because nobody should get away with murder. Isabella's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I don't know the first thing about investigating something like this. That's okay? I do. She pulled out her phone again, pulling up a contacts list. I've been doing research. There are people we can talk to, leads we can follow, but I needed someone I could trust to help me. Someone who won't report back to my uncle or sell information to the press. What about Catherine, your assistant or whatever she is? Catherine is loyal, but she's also practical. If she thought I was putting myself in danger, she'd try to stop me. Or worse, she'd tell my uncle, thinking she was protecting me. Isabella started pacing, energy returning to her movements. We need to move carefully. My uncle can't know we're investigating him. As far as he's concerned, I've accepted the police ruling and I'm moving on. How do we start? Marcus's apartment. The police searched it after the crash, but they were looking for evidence of natural causes. We'll be looking for something else. Proof of contact with my uncle. Unusual deposits. Anything that suggests he was paid off or coerced. That's breaking and entering. It's visiting my late employee's home to collect his personal effects for his family. Isabella smiled thinly. His sister gave me a key. She wants answers too. Evan studied her, this woman who'd almost died in the freezing water, who was standing in her perfect apartment planning to investigate her own attempted murder. There was steel underneath the expensive clothes and careful makeup, strength that money hadn't bought. When do we go? He asked. Tomorrow night, after dark. Can you get away? I'll figure it out. Evan? She stopped pacing and faced him. If you do this, you're putting yourself at risk. My uncle is powerful and ruthless. If he finds out you're helping me, he won't hesitate to hurt you, or your daughter. Then we make sure he doesn't find out. They spent the next hour planning. Isabella had already mapped out Marcus's movements in the days before the crash, identified his regular routes, noted anything unusual in his schedule. She'd obtained his phone records, legally, she assured Evan, through the estate, and found several calls to unlisted numbers in the week before his death. We need to find out who these numbers belong to, she said, pointing at her laptop screen. One of them might be my uncle, or someone working for him. Can't you just call them? And say what? Hi, I think you helped murder my driver. Can you confirm? Isabella shook her head. We need to be smarter than that. We need evidence we can take to the FBI or the state attorney general, someone who can't be bought off. By the time Evan left, it was nearly midnight. Catherine drove him home in silence, and Evan spent the ride staring out at the city, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. He thought about Maya's warning, about rich people playing by different rules. He thought about his parole officer telling him to stay out of trouble. He thought about a man drowning in his own car, paralyzed and helpless, because someone wanted money badly enough to kill for it. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch when he got home, a book open on her chest. Evan woke her gently and walked her next door to her own apartment, thanking her again. Maya was asleep in her room, homework finished and stacked neatly on her desk. Evan stood in her doorway for a long moment, just watching her breathe. He was doing this for her too, he realized, because the world was full of people like Richard Crane, people who thought money and power put them above consequences. Someone had to stand up to them. Someone had to say no. The next day crawled by. Evan went back to work at the warehouse, enduring the questions and congratulations from his co-workers, trying to act normal while his mind was elsewhere. His supervisor pulled him aside at lunch. You doing okay, Cole? You seem distracted. Just tired. Still recovering, I guess. Take it easy. We don't need you collapsing on the floor. The supervisor clapped him on the shoulder. You did a good thing, you know, a real good thing. People around here are proud to know you. Evan managed a smile and went back to work, lifting and sorting and loading, his body moving on autopilot while his brain ran through everything Isabella had told him. A murdered driver, a conspiracy, a man willing to kill his own niece for control of a company. His phone buzzed at 6. Isabella's message was brief. Car will pick you up at 9. Dress dark, bring gloves. Evan told Maya he had to help a friend move some furniture, hating the lie, but knowing she'd worry if she knew the truth. Mrs. Chen agreed to stay with her again, waving off Evan's concerns with the same kindness she always showed. The town car arrived exactly at 9. This time, Isabella was in the back seat, dressed in black jeans and a dark jacket, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger like this, less like a billionaire heiress, and more like someone Maya's age. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. They drove to Queens, to a neighborhood not that different from Evan's own. Working class, modest, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. Marcus's building was a 3-story walk-up, old but well-maintained. Isabella let them in with the key his sister had provided, and they climbed the stairs to the second floor. The apartment was small and neat, frozen in time like a museum exhibit. Mail piled up on the table by the door, a jacket hanging on a hook, dishes in the drying rack, all the small details of a life interrupted. You take the bedroom, Isabella said quietly. I'll search the living room. They worked in silence, careful not to disturb anything too much, looking for something that didn't belong. Evan went through Marcus's closet, his drawers, his nightstand. Everything was ordinary: clothes, books, photos of family. A man who'd lived a normal life right up until someone decided he was expendable. In the nightstand drawer, Evan found a notebook. He flipped through it, finding mostly mundane notes, grocery lists, appointments, car maintenance schedules. But near the back, there were entries that made him stop. January 15th. Meeting RC, the plaza, 3 p.m. January 18th. RC called again. Nervous. Money good, but something off. January 20. Final meeting with RC. Told him I'm out. Not worth it. January 22, the day of the crash. Isabella, Evan called. I found something. She came into the bedroom, and Evan showed her the notebook. Her face went pale as she read the entries. RC, she whispered. Richard Crane. He met with your uncle 4 times in the week before the crash. And look at this last entry. Marcus tried to back out. So my uncle killed him. Isabella's hands were shaking. He hired Marcus to... what? Sabotage the car. And when Marcus got cold feet, he killed him anyway and made it look like part of the accident. We need to find out what the meetings were about, what your uncle offered him. Evan pulled out his phone and photographed every page of the notebook. This is evidence, but it's not proof. RC could be anyone. We need something concrete. They kept searching. In the kitchen, Isabella found Marcus's personal laptop tucked in a cabinet. She opened it, fingers flying over the keyboard. It's password protected, but she typed something, and the screen unlocked. His sister told me his passwords. He always used his mother's maiden name and her birth year. She navigated to his email, scanning through messages. Most were routine, bills, subscriptions, messages from friends, but then she found a folder labeled Private. Inside were emails from an account called RC Enterprises. Evan leaned over her shoulder, reading. We need to meet. The matter we discussed requires discretion. $50,000 for your cooperation. The Plaza, 3 p.m. Another email dated January 18th. Your hesitation is noted but unnecessary. Another $25,000 has been transferred. Complete the task as discussed. And a final email dated January 20th. I'm disappointed by your decision to withdraw. We had an agreement. I trust you'll reconsider. The consequences of breaking our contract would be severe. He threatened him, Isabella breathed. Marcus tried to back out, and my uncle threatened him. Can we trace the email account? Not easily. It's probably routed through a VPN, multiple servers, but the money transfers, those leave trails. She pulled out her phone. I have access to the company's financial records. If my uncle paid Marcus from business accounts, I can find it. They downloaded the emails onto a flash drive, then carefully put everything back the way they'd found it. As they were leaving, Evan paused in the doorway, looking back at the apartment. A good man had lived here, a man who'd made a mistake, who'd been offered money he probably needed, who'd tried to do the right thing in the end and died for it. We're going to get him, Evan said quietly. Your uncle. We're going to make sure he pays for this. I know. Isabella's voice was hard. Because if we don't, I'm next. They left the building and got back in the car. As they pulled away, Evan noticed a black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. It hadn't been there when they arrived. Isabella, he said carefully, don't turn around, but I think someone's watching us. She froze, then slowly adjusted the side mirror. You're right. That's a corporate security vehicle, the kind my uncle's people use. How long has it been there? I don't know. But if they followed us here, if they know we were in Marcus's apartment, they know we're investigating. The SUV pulled out behind them as they drove away, keeping a careful distance but making no attempt to hide. Catherine noticed it too, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. We have company, she said. Lose them, Isabella ordered. Miss Crane, I don't think... Lose them, Catherine. Now. Catherine's jaw tightened, but she obeyed. She took a sudden right turn, accelerated through a yellow light, cut through a gas station parking lot, and emerged on a different street. The SUV tried to follow, but Catherine was good. She took them on a winding route through Queens, mixing speed with unpredictable turns until the SUV was nowhere in sight. They didn't speak until they were back in Manhattan, pulling up to Isabella's building. He knows, Isabella said quietly. My uncle knows we're on to him, which means he'll be more careful, or more desperate. More dangerous. She looked at Evan. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. Too late for that. Evan managed a smile. Besides, I'm already in. Might as well see it through. What do we do now? We find the money trail. We connect your uncle to the payments to Marcus. And we do it fast before he makes another move. Isabella nodded, but Evan could see the fear in her eyes. Someone had tried to kill her once. Now that person knew she was getting close to the truth. The next attempt would come soon. And this time, Evan might not be there to pull her from the water. He rode home in silence, watching the city pass by outside the window, wondering if the SUV was somewhere behind them, watching, waiting. When he got back to his apartment, he checked every lock twice, looked out every window, made sure Maya was safe in her room. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. Thank you for tonight. Be careful. He typed back, You too. Lock your doors. Trust no one. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Except you. Evan set his phone down and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building settling around him. Somewhere in this city, Richard Crane was planning his next move. Somewhere, men in black SUVs were reporting back that Isabella was asking questions, digging where she shouldn't dig. And somewhere, a woman who'd almost drowned in the Hudson River was lying awake in her perfect apartment, knowing that the person who wanted her dead was her own blood. Evan closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. He couldn't, because tomorrow they'd have to dig deeper, push harder, get closer to the truth. And the closer they got, the more dangerous it would become. The financial records came 3 days later, delivered to Evan's apartment in a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note from Isabella. Found the transfers. We need to talk. Come to the office tomorrow, 2 p.m. Ask for me at reception. Evan turned the flash drive over in his fingers, feeling the weight of what it represented. Proof. Evidence. The kind of thing that could bring down a man like Richard Crane, or get them both killed trying. He plugged it into his laptop and opened the files. Spreadsheets filled the screen, rows and columns of numbers that meant nothing to him at first. But Isabella had highlighted certain transactions in yellow, and once Evan started following the trail, the pattern became clear. January 10th, wire transfer from Crane Industries discretionary fund to offshore account, $50,000. January 18th, another transfer, $25,000. Same account. January 23rd, the day after the crash, $100,000 transferred to the same offshore account, then immediately dispersed to 3 different locations. Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Someone was covering their tracks. Someone with access to company funds and the sophistication to move money through international banking systems. Someone exactly like Richard Crane. Evan's phone rang. Isabella's name appeared on the screen. "You got the drive," she said without preamble. "I'm looking at it now. This is solid, Isabella. This connects your uncle to payments made right before and after Marcus died." "It's not enough. The offshore account is registered to a shell corporation. My uncle's lawyers will argue he had no knowledge of the transfers, that someone else in the company made them without his authorization. Can you prove he controlled that account?" "Not directly, but I have an idea." Her voice dropped lower. "My uncle keeps a private office in the Crane Industries building. Not his CEO office, a different one, smaller, on the 40th floor. He thinks I don't know about it. That's where he keeps his real files, the ones he doesn't want on company servers. You want to break into his office? I want to find the documentation that proves he owns that shell corporation, bank statements, incorporation papers, anything that ties him directly to those transfers." Evan stood and walked to his window, looking down at the street below. A black SUV was parked 3 buildings down, engine idling. It had been there for 2 days now, always in sight of his apartment. They were being watched. "Isabella, they know we're investigating. They're watching my building right now." "I know. They're watching mine too. 2 men in the lobby pretending to wait for someone, shifts changing every 8 hours. She paused. "That's why we have to move now, before my uncle decides surveillance isn't enough." "How do we get into the building without being seen?" "I own the building, remember? I have access to everything. Security codes, camera blind spots, maintenance schedules. Tomorrow is Saturday. The executive floors will be empty except for one security guard who does rounds every hour. We'll have 55 minutes to get in and out. And if we get caught, then I fire whoever catches us and we try again." There was steel in her voice. "Evan, I know this is asking a lot. You have Maya to think about. If you want out, I understand." Evan thought about his daughter sleeping safely in the next room. He thought about the men watching his building, about how easily someone with Richard Crane's resources could hurt the people he loved. The safest thing would be to walk away, to let Isabella fight this battle alone. But walking away meant Richard Crane would win. It meant Marcus's death would go unpunished. It meant Isabella would face the next assassination attempt alone, with no one she could trust. "I'm not going anywhere, sir," Evan said. "What time tomorrow?" 8 p.m., after dark. I'll pick you up 2 blocks from your apartment. Wear something you can move in." After they hung up, Evan spent an hour making arrangements. He called Mrs. Chen, who agreed to take Maya for the evening, a girls' night, he told her, movies and popcorn. He called his parole officer and left a message saying he'd be helping a friend move furniture the next day, just covering his bases in case anything went wrong. Then he sat down with Maya over dinner and lied to her face about his plans. Just helping someone with some computer stuff, he said, hating how easily the deception came. Might be late. You'll stay with Mrs. Chen? Dad, what's really going on? Maya set down her fork and looked at him with those two old eyes. You've been acting weird all week. I was sneaking out at night, checking the windows every 5 minutes. There's a car watching our building. You noticed that? I'm 15, not blind. She leaned forward. Does this have to do with Isabella Crane? There was no point lying. Maya was too smart for that, and she deserved better than to be kept in the dark about threats to their safety. Yeah, Evan admitted. It does. The car accident that put her in the river, it might not have been an accident. Someone might have tried to kill her. And you're helping her figure out who. I'm trying to. Dad, Maya's voice was tight with worry. These are rich people, dangerous people. You can't just, I know, but if I don't help her, she might die. And if the people who tried to kill her think we know too much, they might come after us too. The only way to keep us safe is to find proof of what they did and take it to the authorities. So tomorrow you're doing something risky. Probably. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come back. I promise, baby. I always come back. You better. Because if you get yourself killed playing hero, I will never forgive you. Evan squeezed her hand, his throat tight. Noted. The next evening arrived too quickly. Evan dressed in dark jeans and a black pullover, feeling like he was preparing for a heist movie. He kissed Maya goodbye and walked 2 blocks to the meeting point, checking over his shoulder every few steps. The black SUV didn't follow him, but that didn't mean they weren't watching. Isabella's town car pulled up exactly on time. She was in the back seat again, dressed similarly to him in dark clothes and running shoes. Her hair was braided tight against her head, and there was a determined set to her jaw that Evan recognized. She was terrified and doing it anyway. Ready? She asked as he climbed in. Let's get this over with. Catherine drove them into the financial district, where glass towers stretched toward the sky like monuments to capital. The Crane Industries building was one of the tallest, a sleek column of steel and windows that reflected the city lights. At this hour on a Saturday, the surrounding streets were nearly empty. They parked in an underground garage 3 blocks away and walked to the building through connected tunnels. Isabella led them through a service entrance, swiping a key card that opened the heavy metal door with a soft click. Security cameras? Evan asked. Disabled on this level for the next hour, maintenance issue with the wiring. Isabella's smile was grim. Convenient timing. They took a service elevator to the 40th floor, rising in silence. Evan's heart was hammering against his ribs. This was breaking and entering, trespassing, possibly corporate espionage depending on what they found. His parole officer's warnings echoed in his head. One more incident and you're done. The elevator doors opened onto a darkened hallway. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to see by. Isabella pulled out her phone and brought up a building schematic. This way. His office is at the end of the hall, corner suite. They moved quickly and quietly, their footsteps muffled by plush carpet. The executive floor was eerily silent, all the offices dark and empty. Through the windows, the city spread out below them like a field of stars. Richard Crane's private office was locked with a keypad. Isabella entered a code, and the lock beeped softly. The door swung open. Inside was exactly what Evan expected from a man like Richard Crane. Expensive furniture, abstract art on the walls, a desk that probably cost more than Evan's car. But there was also a wall safe behind a painting and filing cabinets that looked old-fashioned in the digital age. You take the desk, I'll start on the safe, Isabella said, moving toward the painting. You know how to crack a safe? YouTube is a wonderful thing. She pulled the painting aside, revealing a digital safe with a keypad. My uncle is old school. He doesn't trust cloud storage or digital encryption. Everything important, he keeps physical copies. Evan started going through the desk drawers, files, contracts, business correspondence. Everything looked legitimate on the surface. He photographed documents that mentioned offshore accounts or shell corporations, not sure what would be useful, but taking everything just in case. "How long do we have?" he asked. Isabella checked her watch. 40 minutes before the security guard makes his next round. She worked on the safe, trying different combinations, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. Evan moved to the filing cabinets and found them unlocked. Arrogance or oversight, he couldn't tell. Inside were folders organized by year and category. He flipped through them quickly, scanning labels. Then he found it. A folder labeled Private Holdings, RCE Ventures. Inside were incorporation documents for a Cayman Islands shell company, bank statements showing the same offshore account numbers from Isabella's financial records, signed authorizations with Richard Crane's name at the bottom, wire transfer confirmations matching the exact amounts and dates of the payments to Marcus. "Isabella," Evan breathed. "I found it. All of it." She turned from the safe, eyes wide. "You're sure?" "Look." He spread the documents on the desk, photographing each page with his phone. "This proves your uncle controlled the offshore account. These wire transfers match the payments to Marcus exactly. And look at this." He pointed to a document dated January 25th, 3 days after the crash. Authorization for another $100,000 transfer. Same account. Payment for services rendered. "He paid for my murder." Isabella's voice was hollow. "There it is, in black and white. He paid someone to kill me." They spent the next 20 minutes photographing everything, making sure they had clear images of every relevant document. Evan was just finishing the last file when Isabella's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "Security alert. Someone just entered the building through the main entrance." "The guard." "No, the guard uses the side entrance. This is someone else." She pulled up the security camera feed on her phone. "Oh no." Evan looked over her shoulder at the screen. Richard Crane was stepping into the lobby, accompanied by 2 large men in dark suits. They were heading for the elevators. "We need to leave. Now." They shoved the documents back into the filing cabinet, trying to leave everything exactly as they'd found it. Isabella closed the safe. She'd never managed to open it, but it didn't matter anymore. They had what they needed. Evan grabbed the last of his photos and they ran for the door. The elevator dinged. They were out of time. Richard Crane was on this floor, maybe seconds away from walking down this hall. Isabella grabbed Evan's arm and pulled him toward a door marked Emergency Exit. "The stairs. We can make it down before he realizes anyone's here." They burst into the stairwell and started descending, taking the steps 2 at a time. Behind them, they heard the stairwell door on the 40th floor open. Heavy footsteps echoed above them, moving fast. "They know we're here," Evan said. "Keep moving." They flew down the stairs, flight after flight, the sound of pursuit getting closer. Evan's lungs burned. His legs ached. They'd made it down maybe 10 floors when the footsteps above them multiplied. More than 2 people now, maybe 4 or 5. "They're cutting us off," Isabella gasped. Sure enough, when they reached the 25th floor, the stairwell door below them burst open. 2 men in dark suits stepped into the stairwell, blocking their path. Above them, more footsteps were closing in. They were trapped. Evan looked around desperately. The 25th floor stairwell door was right next to them. He tried the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. "Isabella, your key card." She handed it over without question. Evan swiped it against the reader and prayed. The lock clicked green. He yanked the door open and pulled Isabella through, slamming it behind them just as the men from below reached their landing. They were in another darkened hallway, this one lined with cubicles instead of executive offices. Evan could hear the men in the stairwell shouting, their voices muffled by the heavy door. "This way!" Isabella led him through the maze of cubicles toward another door at the far end of the floor. "There's another stairwell on the opposite side of the building." They ran through the darkness, weaving between desks and filing cabinets. Behind them, the stairwell door crashed open. The men were in the hallway now, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. "There! I see them!" Evan and Isabella sprinted for the far door. The men behind them were shouting into radios, coordinating. More footsteps were coming from somewhere else on the floor. They were being surrounded. They reached the second stairwell and plunged through the door. Down more flights, Evan's phone threatening to fall from his pocket with every step. The evidence. They had to protect the evidence. "Give me your phone," he told Isabella as they ran. She handed it over without breaking stride. Evan pulled up the cloud backup on both phones, making sure all the photos they'd taken were uploading to secure storage. Even if the phones got smashed or taken, the evidence would survive. The upload finished just as they reached the 10th floor. Below them, the stairwell door opened and more men poured in. Above them, the pursuit continued. They were being boxed in from both directions. "We have to get off the stairs," Evan said. They burst through the 10th floor door and found themselves in what looked like a conference center, large meeting rooms with glass walls, a reception area with plush seating. Isabella ran to one of the meeting rooms and locked the door behind them. "What now?" she demanded. "We're trapped." Evan looked around the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city and a 30-story drop. The door was glass and wouldn't hold for long. The men were already in the hallway, spreading out to cover all the exits. Then he noticed the ventilation grate in the ceiling. "You've got to be kidding," Isabella said, following his gaze. "You have a better idea?" "I'm wearing a skirt." "Then I guess you're about to get very familiar with the building's ductwork." Evan dragged a conference table under the grate and climbed up. The screws were Phillips head, and he didn't have a screwdriver. He pulled out his keys and used the flat edge to work on the screws, his fingers slipping with sweat. The men reached the glass door. One of them pulled out a key card. 5 seconds, maybe less. The last screw came free. Evan yanked the grate down and reached for Isabella. "Come on!" She climbed onto the table and Evan hoisted her up into the ductwork. She was lighter than he expected, all lean muscle and determination. He pulled himself up after her just as the door opened behind them. "They're in the ducts. Block the exits." The ventilation shaft was cramped and dark, barely wide enough to crawl through. Isabella moved forward on her hands and knees, Evan right behind her. The metal was cold and sharp-edged, cutting into his palms. Behind them, he could hear someone trying to climb into the duct. "Keep going," he urged. "Don't stop." They crawled through the darkness, following the shaft as it turned corners and split into branches. Isabella seemed to know where she was going, taking turns with confidence, even though Evan could barely see anything. "I studied the building plans," she explained, her voice echoing oddly in the confined space. "When I inherited the company, I wanted to know everything about it, including the ventilation system. Remind me to thank your grandfather for being thorough." The shaft suddenly angled downward, becoming a steep slide. They descended rapidly, the metal cold against their bodies, unable to slow down or stop. Evan's shoulder slammed into the side of the duct, sending a spike of pain through his arm. Then they were tumbling out into a larger space, hitting the ground hard. They'd fallen into a mechanical room in the building's basement. Massive air handlers rumbled around them, and pipes ran along the ceiling in complex webs. The air was hot and smelled of oil and dust. Evan got to his feet and helped Isabella up. She had a scrape across her cheek and her clothes were filthy, but her eyes were bright with adrenaline. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than okay. We made it." She pulled out her phone, miraculously unbroken, and checked the photos. "And we still have the evidence. We need to get out of this building before they find us." They navigated through the mechanical room, following the sound of street traffic until they found a service door that led to an alley. Isabella's keycard worked one last time, and then they were outside in the cold night air, breathing hard and covered in dust. The alley was empty, the city sounds distant. They leaned against the wall, catching their breath. "That was insane," Isabella said. "That was your uncle's people trying to kill us." "No, if they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. They wanted to catch us, find out what we know, what evidence we have." She looked at him. "Which means we're running out of time. My uncle knows we're investigating him. He'll move faster now." "Then we move faster too." Evan pulled out his phone and started composing an email. "We send these photos to everyone we can think of. FBI, State Attorney General, every newspaper in New York. We flood the zone with evidence so your uncle can't make it disappear. He'll deny everything. Say the documents are fake. Maybe. But the offshore account is real. The wire transfers are real. Once the authorities start looking, they'll find more. Your uncle's been doing this for years. There will be other crimes, other victims. Evan hit send on the first email. We just have to give them enough to start the investigation. They made their way back to the parking garage where Catherine was waiting, pacing nervously beside the car. When she saw them covered in dust and scraped up, her eyes went wide. What happened? Long story, Isabella said. Let's get out of here first. The drive back was tense and silent. Evan kept checking behind them for signs of pursuit, but the streets were empty. When they finally reached Isabella's building, Catherine pulled into the underground garage instead of the front entrance. Security called, she said quietly. There are reporters in the lobby. Someone tipped them off that you were in the building tonight, that there was an incident. My uncle, Isabella said. He's already controlling the narrative. They took a service elevator up to Isabella's apartment. Once inside, Isabella collapsed onto her couch, suddenly looking exhausted. Evan's phone was buzzing constantly, responses to the emails he'd sent, some automated, some from actual people promising to look into the evidence. What now? Isabella asked. Now we wait. We sent the evidence to enough people that your uncle can't suppress all of it. Someone will investigate. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you stay somewhere safe, somewhere your uncle doesn't know about. As Evan sat down across from her. Do you have anyone you trust? Family, friends, old colleagues, someone outside your uncle's reach? My grandfather had a cottage upstate. No one knows about it except me and the property manager. I could go there. Good. Pack a bag. Leave tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not even Catherine. Isabella nodded slowly. What about you? If my uncle thinks you're helping me, he'll come after you too. Let him try. Evan's voice was harder than he intended. I've dealt with dangerous people before. I'll be fine. Evan, she leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. You jumped into a frozen river to save my life. You've risked everything to help me find the truth. I can't let you face my uncle's people alone. You're not letting me do anything. This is my choice. Then let me hire you proper security, bodyguards, safe house, whatever you need. I don't need bodyguards. I need to know you're safe so I can focus on keeping my daughter safe. Evan stood. Go to your cottage. Lay low for a few days. Let the authorities do their job. Isabella stood too, closing the distance between them. When this is over, when my uncle is in prison where he belongs, I want to do something for you. Something real. Not money. I know you won't take that. But something meaningful. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. Her hand found his, squeezing gently. You gave me my life back, twice now. That's not a debt I can ever really repay. Evan looked at her standing there in her dusty clothes with a scrape on her cheek, this woman who'd gone from drowning in a river to crawling through air ducts in the span of 2 weeks, and he realized something. She wasn't just a billionaire heiress anymore. She was someone he respected, someone he cared about, someone he was willing to protect, whatever it cost him. Just promise me you'll be careful, he said. Promise me you'll stay hidden until this is over. I promise. She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. Thank you, Evan, for everything. Catherine drove him home through the empty streets. The black SUV was gone from outside his building, which either meant they'd given up surveillance or they were being more subtle about it. Evan checked every shadow as he walked to his door. Inside, Maya and Mrs. Chen were asleep on the couch, a movie playing softly on the TV. Evan stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at his daughter's peaceful face, and felt the weight of everything they'd done tonight settle onto his shoulders. They had the evidence. They'd sent it to the authorities. But Richard Crane was powerful and ruthless, and he knew they were coming for him. The next move would be his, and Evan had a feeling it would come soon. The call came at 3 a.m. Evan jerked awake to his phone vibrating on the nightstand, the screen too bright in the darkness. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. Mr. Cole. The voice was smooth, cultured, unfamiliar. I apologize for the late hour. My name is Richard Crane. Evan sat up, instantly alert. His heart hammered against his ribs. How did you get this number? I have access to resources you can't imagine, but that's not important right now. What's important is that we talk, you and I, man to man. I have nothing to say to you. I think you do. You've been spending quite a bit of time with my niece, breaking into buildings, stealing confidential documents, spreading lies to the authorities. Richard's tone remained pleasant, conversational. I know what you think you know, Mr. Cole, and I'm calling to offer you a chance to walk away from this situation intact. Is that a threat? It's a business proposition. You're a smart man who made some mistakes in his past. I respect that. We've all made choices we regret. But right now, you're making another mistake, and this one could cost you everything. Evan glanced toward Maya's room, making sure her door was still closed. Say what you need to say. Isabella is unwell. The trauma of the accident, the oxygen deprivation, it's affected her judgment. She's become paranoid, seeing conspiracies where there are none. The documents you photographed are legitimate business records that she's misinterpreting through the lens of her illness. Those documents prove you paid Marcus to sabotage the car. They prove I made business payments to offshore accounts, which is entirely legal and completely unrelated to that tragic accident. Richard sighed, a sound of practiced regret. Marcus had a heart condition he'd hidden from everyone. It killed him while he was driving. My niece survived through sheer luck and your heroic intervention. That's the truth, Mr. Cole. Everything else is the fantasy of a traumatized young woman who can't accept that sometimes terrible things just happen. You're lying. Am I? Then why haven't the police arrested me? Why haven't the FBI shown up at my door? You sent your so-called evidence to every agency in New York, and yet here I am, a free man, while you're the one who committed breaking and entering last night. The pleasantness in Richard's voice sharpened slightly. You're on parole, aren't you? One violation and you go back to prison. How long would you last this time? 2 years? 5? And what happens to your daughter while you're locked up? Evan's grip on the phone tightened. Don't you talk about my daughter. I'm not threatening her. I'm pointing out reality. You're risking everything for a woman you barely know, based on evidence you don't understand. Richard paused. I'm offering you a way out. $500,000, tax-free, deposited in any account you choose. All you have to do is convince Isabella to seek psychiatric treatment and stop this crusade. Help her get the help she needs. You want me to convince her she's crazy. I want you to help her accept the truth and move forward with her life. With proper treatment, she'll recover. The family will support her, of course. We take care of our own. Another pause. Think about it, Mr. Cole. $500,000. You could move your daughter to a better neighborhood, send her to a good college, never worry about money again. All for doing the right thing and helping a troubled young woman. The right thing is making sure you pay for murdering your driver and trying to kill your niece. Then I'm afraid you've chosen poorly. The warmth drained from Richard's voice completely, leaving something cold and hard underneath. I gave you a chance to be smart about this. I offered you a generous way out. But if you insist on continuing down this path, the consequences will be on your head, not mine. Is that another threat? It's a promise. You're out of your depth, Mr. Cole. You're a warehouse worker playing detective, and you have no idea what you've walked into. But you will. Very soon you'll understand exactly how badly you've miscalculated. Richard's tone shifted back to pleasant. Goodbye, Mr. Cole. I hope for your sake and your daughter's sake that you reconsider your position before it's too late. The line went dead. Evan sat in the darkness staring at his phone, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Richard Crane had just offered him $500,000 to betray Isabella. More than that, he'd threatened Maya without quite saying the words directly. The message was clear. Back off or everyone you love will suffer. He got up and checked the locks on the door, then looked out the window at the street below. The black SUV was back, parked in its usual spot, watching, waiting. Evan closed the blinds and went to Maya's room, opening the door just enough to see her sleeping peacefully. She was safe. For now. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The offer expires in 24 hours. Choose wisely. Evan deleted the message and called Isabella. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice thick with sleep. Evan? What's wrong? Your uncle just called me. He knows about the documents. He knows everything. What did he say? She was fully awake now. He offered me money to convince you that you're paranoid and delusional. When I refused, he threatened my daughter. Evan kept his voice low, not wanting to wake Maya. Isabella, this is getting too dangerous. We need to go to the police right now. Tell them everything. Ask for protection. We can't, not yet. She was quiet for a moment. I got a call too, about an hour ago, from the FBI agent I sent the documents to. He said they're reviewing the evidence, but it's going to take time. Weeks, maybe months to build a case. And in the meantime, my uncle is free to do whatever he wants. Then what do? We force his hand. We make him act in a way he can't cover up or deny. Isabella's voice was steady, determined. I'm coming back to the city. Tomorrow. I'm calling a press conference. That's insane. He'll kill you the moment you show your face. Not in front of cameras and reporters. Not with the whole world watching. She was already moving. Evan could hear it in the background. I'm going to tell everyone what he did. The attempted murder, the conspiracy, all of it. I'll show the documents, explain the evidence. Once it's public, he can't make it disappear. He'll destroy your credibility. He'll say you're mentally ill, traumatized, making it all up. Maybe. But some people will believe me. The authorities will have to investigate more thoroughly. And my uncle will be under too much scrutiny to make another attempt on my life without everyone knowing exactly who to blame. Evan paced his small living room, thinking it through. It was risky, maybe suicidal. But Isabella was right about one thing. Staying hidden wasn't working. Richard Crane knew where they were, what they were doing. He was already making moves against them. The only way to survive was to go on offense. When's the press conference? He asked. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m., the Crane Industries building, main conference room. She paused. I want you there, standing beside me. You're the one who saved my life. You're the witness to what happened. Your presence adds credibility. Or it makes us both targets in the same place at the same time. I know what I'm asking, and I'll understand if you say no. But Evan, I need you. I can't do this alone. He thought about Maya sleeping in the next room. He thought about Richard Crane's voice on the phone, smooth and threatening. He thought about Marcus drowning in his car, conscious and paralyzed, knowing he was about to die. I'll be there, he said. But we do this smart. Security, multiple exits, people we trust watching our backs. Agreed. I'll arrange everything. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you. Again. Don't thank me until we survive this. After they hung up, Evan couldn't sleep. He spent the rest of the night sitting by the window, watching the black SUV, planning for every contingency he could think of. When the sun finally rose, he made breakfast for Maya and tried to act normal, like his world wasn't about to explode in approximately 8 hours. You look terrible, Maya observed over cereal. Didn't sleep much. Nightmares? Something like that. Evan poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake. Listen, I need you to do something for me today. Can you stay at Aunt Teresa's? Maya's aunt, Evan's sister, lived in New Jersey, far enough away to be safe if things went sideways. Maya's eyes narrowed. What's happening, Dad? Just a precaution. Things are getting complicated with the Isabella Crane situation. How complicated? Complicated enough that I'd feel better if you were somewhere else for a day or two. He sat down across from her. Please, Maya, just trust me on this. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but you have to promise to call me every few hours. And if something goes wrong, you tell me immediately. I promise. He drove her to Port Authority and put her on a bus to Teresa's, watching until the bus pulled away and disappeared into traffic. Then he went back to his apartment and prepared for the press conference like he was preparing for war. At 1 p.m., Catherine picked him up in the town car. Isabella was already in the back seat, dressed in a dark blue suit that made her look older, more authoritative. She'd done something to her makeup that hid the exhaustion in her eyes. Ready? She asked. No, but let's do it anyway. The drive to the Crane Industries building was surreal. News vans were already setting up outside, reporters checking equipment and comparing notes. Someone had leaked the press conference, and the media smelled blood in the water. The building lobby was packed with people. Journalists, cameramen, corporate employees trying to figure out what was happening. Catherine led them through a side entrance and up to the conference room on the 20th floor. The room was large and professional, with a long table at the front and chairs for at least 100 people. It was already filling up fast. We've got security at every entrance, Catherine said quietly. No one gets in without credentials. I've also got our head of security monitoring the cameras. If your uncle or his people try anything, we'll see them coming. Isabella nodded, but Evan could see the tension in her shoulders. She was terrified. So was he. At exactly 2 p.m., Isabella walked to the front of the room and stood behind the microphone. The conversations died away. Cameras focused on her. Evan stood to the side, trying to look calm and supportive, while his heart raced. "Thank you all for coming," Isabella began. Her voice was steady, clear. 3 weeks ago, I nearly died when my car went off the George Washington Bridge. Most of you know this story already. What you don't know is that it wasn't an accident. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Isabella continued. My driver, Marcus Chen, was murdered. He was injected with a paralytic agent that caused him to lose control of the vehicle while remaining conscious. The intention was for both of us to die in the crash, making it look like a tragic accident. She pulled out her phone and brought up the documents. I have evidence that my uncle, Richard Crane, paid for this murder through shell corporations and offshore accounts. Wire transfers totaling $175,000 made in the days before and after the crash. The murmurs grew louder. Reporters were shouting questions. Isabella raised her hand for quiet. I'm sharing these documents with you today because the authorities have been slow to act, and because I believe my life is still in danger. My uncle wants me dead so he can control Crane Industries. He's already made one attempt. I have reason to believe he'll make another. She looked directly at the cameras. I'm making this public because sunshine is the best disinfectant. If something happens to me now, everyone will know exactly who's responsible. That's when the doors at the back of the conference room burst open. Richard Crane strode in with 4 security guards, his face a mask of concern and sorrow. He was in his 50s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing an expensive suit and the expression of a man deeply worried about a loved one. Isabella, sweetheart, please stop this, he said, his voice carrying across the room. You're not well. You've been through a terrible trauma, and you need help, not this circus. Don't you dare, Isabella said, her voice shaking with anger. Don't you dare pretend to care about me after you tried to have me killed. I love you. We all love you. But these delusions, these accusations, they're symptoms of your illness. Richard turned to the cameras, playing to the audience. My niece suffered severe oxygen deprivation in the accident. The doctors warned us she might experience paranoia, confusion, difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy. We've been trying to get her into treatment, but she's refused. I'm not delusional. Of course you believe that. That's part of the condition. Richard's tone was patient, sympathetic. The documents you're showing them, those are legitimate business records you've misinterpreted. The offshore accounts are legal tax structures. The wire transfers are routine business payments. There's no conspiracy, Isabella. There's only a tragic accident and a young woman who can't accept that sometimes terrible things just happen. Evan watched the reporters, saw some of them nodding, buying Richard's performance. The man was good, smooth, credible, showing just enough emotion to seem genuine without overdoing it. Isabella pulled out another document. Then explain this. Marcus's notebook, where he recorded his meetings with you, where he wrote that he was backing out of your deal because it wasn't worth it, where he noted that you threatened him when he tried to quit. I never met with Marcus except in professional settings. If there's a notebook claiming otherwise, it's either fabricated or the confused notes of a man who is suffering from an undiagnosed heart condition. Richard shook his head sadly. Isabella, please, let me help you. Let's get you to a hospital where you can receive proper care. I don't need a hospital. I need you in prison. Your grandfather would be heartbroken to see you like this. Richard's voice cracked slightly, a masterful touch. He loved you so much. He wanted you to lead this company, to carry on his legacy. But he'd want you healthy more than anything. Please, let us help you. Evan had heard enough. He stepped forward, moving to stand beside Isabella. My name is Evan Cole, he said into the microphone. I'm the one who pulled Isabella from the river. I was there. I saw the driver's body, saw the position he was in. I talked to Isabella right after she woke up in the hospital, and she was lucid and clear. She told me something felt wrong about the crash, and she's been consistent about that ever since. Richard's eyes found Evan's, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. What Evan saw underneath was cold and calculating and completely devoid of the concern Richard was performing for the cameras. "Mr. Cole, I appreciate what you did for my niece. You're a hero, but you're not a medical professional, and you're not in a position to evaluate her mental state." "No, but I am in a position to evaluate evidence. And the evidence says you paid Marcus Chen to kill Isabella. When he tried to back out, you killed him anyway and tried to make it look like heart failure. That's a serious accusation to make without proof." "We have proof. Bank records, wire transfers, emails, Marcus's notebook. All of it points to you." "Documents can be faked. Mentally ill people can convince themselves of elaborate stories." Richard spread his hands. "I'm not angry at you, Mr. Cole, or at Isabella. I understand you both believe what you're saying, but belief isn't the same as truth." Isabella pulled out her phone again. "Then let's talk about truth. 3 days ago, someone tried to intercept us in this very building. Men in corporate security uniforms chased us through the executive floors while we were collecting evidence from your private office. The same office where we found documents proving you control the offshore accounts used to pay Marcus." "You broke into my office?" Richard's expression shifted to disappointment. "Isabella, that's illegal. Breaking and entering, corporate espionage. You could be arrested for that. So could you, for murder." The room had gone completely silent. Every eye was on the confrontation playing out at the front of the room. Cameras were recording everything. This was exactly what Isabella wanted. Richard Crane forced to respond to accusations in public, on the record, where he couldn't control the narrative completely. Richard seemed to realize this too. His expression hardened slightly. "I think this press conference is over. Isabella needs medical attention, not media attention. I'm asking all of you to respect our family's privacy during this difficult time." "This family tried to kill me," Isabella said, her voice ringing clear, "and I'm not going to be quiet about it. I'm not going to let you gaslight me into thinking I'm crazy. I know what you did. Evan knows what you did, and soon everyone will know. If you truly believe I'm guilty of something, take your evidence to the police. Let the courts decide." "I already did. And when they're done investigating, you'll be the one who needs a lawyer, not a doctor." Richard stared at his niece for a long moment, and Evan could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. Isabella had outmaneuvered him, turned his own tactics against him. The doubt he'd tried to plant about her mental state was competing with the specific evidence she'd presented. Some people would believe him, but others would believe her. The story wasn't going to die quietly. "I'm sorry you feel this way," Richard said finally. "I truly am. But I won't engage with these fantasies anymore. When you're ready to accept help, the family will be here for you." He turned and walked out, his security guards following. The moment the doors closed behind him, the reporters erupted with questions, all shouting at once. "Ms. Crane, are you afraid for your life? Mr. Cole, why did you decide to help with this investigation? Do you have more evidence beyond what you've shown today? What do the police say about your accusations?" Isabella raised her hands for quiet. "I've prepared a packet of documents for each of you. Everything we discussed today, plus additional evidence. I encourage you to review it carefully and draw your own conclusions. Thank you for being here." Catherine and 2 security guards escorted them out through a side door while the reporters continued shouting questions. They took a service elevator down to the garage, moving quickly. "That went better than expected," Catherine said. "He showed his hand, got defensive. Some of those reporters saw through his act. Some did, some didn't." Isabella's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "But it's out there, the story. People are going to start asking questions." They were halfway to the car when the lights in the parking garage went out. Evan's combat instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Isabella and pulled her behind a concrete pillar, his body between her and the darkness. "Catherine, stay down. It's just a power outage," Catherine said, but her voice was uncertain. "No, this is planned." Evan's eyes were adjusting to the darkness, picking out shapes and shadows. "They knew we'd come down here. They cut the power." Footsteps echoed through the garage, coming from multiple directions. Evan counted at least 4 people, maybe more. They were being surrounded. "Emergency exit," Isabella whispered. "Northeast corner, about 50 yards that way. Can you make it?" "I can run." Then run, now! They broke from cover and sprinted toward where Isabella had pointed. Behind them, the footsteps accelerated. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, searching for them. There! I see them! Evan glanced back and saw 4 men in dark clothes, running hard. They weren't security guards. They were professionals, moving with coordination and purpose. Richard Crane's final solution to the Isabella problem. The emergency exit appeared ahead. A green sign barely visible in the darkness. Evan slammed into the crash bar and the door flew open, spilling them into a concrete stairwell. They ran up, taking the steps 2 at a time, bursting out into a service alley behind the building. A car was waiting. Not Catherine's town car, a black sedan with tinted windows and engine running. The driver's side door opened and a man stepped out, large and armed. "Miss Crane, please come with us. Mr. Crane is concerned for your safety." "Like hell," Evan said. He looked around desperately. The alley had one way in and one way out. The 4 men from the garage were coming up the stairs behind them. The armed man was blocking their path forward. They were trapped again. Then Evan noticed the fire escape on the building across the alley, ladder pulled up but reachable if they could climb the dumpster and jump. "Isabella, can you climb?" She saw where he was looking and nodded. "Yes." "Then we go up on 3. 1. The armed man moved toward them. The door behind them burst open. 2. Evan grabbed Isabella's hand. 3. They ran for the dumpster and scrambled up. The armed man was shouting, running after them. Evan boosted Isabella up to the fire escape ladder, and she caught it, pulling herself up with strength born of pure terror. Evan jumped and grabbed the bottom rung, his shoulders screaming as he hauled himself up behind her. A gunshot cracked through the alley. The bullet sparked off the metal ladder inches from Evan's hand. He looked down and saw the armed man aiming for a second shot. "Climb! Don't stop!" They went up the fire escape as fast as they could, flight after flight, while more shots echoed below. The bullets weren't trying to kill them, Evan realized. They were trying to stop them, to wound and capture. Richard wanted Isabella alive so he could commit her to a psychiatric facility, discredit her completely. They reached the roof and ran across it, jumping the gap to the next building. Behind them, the men were climbing the fire escape, gaining ground. Ahead was another roof, then another. The city spread out around them, thousands of people going about their lives with no idea that 2 people were running for their lives just above their heads. "There!" Isabella pointed to a rooftop access door on the next building. "If we can get inside." They jumped another gap, stumbled, kept running. The access door was locked, but Evan kicked it hard again and again until the old wood splintered around the lock and gave way. They plunged into darkness, into a stairwell that smelled of mildew and decay. Down they went, all the way to the ground floor, emerging into a different alley in a different part of the financial district. Isabella pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called someone. "Catherine, where are you? We're on Liberty Street, back alley behind the old stock exchange building. We need extraction now." They pressed themselves into a recessed doorway and waited, listening for sounds of pursuit. Evan's phone buzzed. A text from Richard Crane's number. "This can still end peacefully. Surrender and seek treatment. Last chance." Evan showed it to Isabella. She read it and laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "He just tried to have us kidnapped or killed, and he's still pretending this is about my mental health." That's what he'll tell the police. That we were being escorted to a hospital for evaluation when we ran. That the gunshots were warning shots, not an assassination attempt. He can tell them whatever he wants. I'm not backing down. Isabella's jaw was set, her eyes hard. He wants a war? He's got one. Catherine's town car screeched around the corner. They ran for it and dove into the back seat. Catherine hit the gas before their doors were even closed, racing through the streets of Lower Manhattan. "Where to?" she asked. "Somewhere public," Isabella said. "Somewhere with cameras and witnesses. A hotel. The Plaza." "Miss Crane, with all due respect, a hotel won't keep you safe if your uncle is really trying to kill you. It's not about being safe. It's about being visible. He can't make me disappear if everyone knows where I am." They checked into the Plaza under false names, taking a suite on an upper floor. Isabella immediately called her lawyer, the FBI agent handling the case, and 3 different news producers. She was done hiding, done being quiet. She was going to fight her uncle with every weapon she had, Publicity, legal action, media pressure. Evan stood by the window, looking down at the street below, checking for black SUVs or suspicious cars. His phone rang. Maya's name appeared on the screen. "Dad? I saw the news. They're saying Isabella Crane had a psychotic break at a press conference and you helped her escape from medical professionals. They're saying you might be in danger, that she's manipulating you." "I'm fine, baby. Don't believe what you see on TV. "But, Dad, everything Isabella said is true. Her uncle tried to kill her, and he's using his money and influence to make her look crazy. We have evidence. The authorities are investigating. It's going to be okay. You promise?" Evan looked at Isabella, who was on the phone with her lawyer, her voice firm and clear as she explained the attack in the garage. He thought about Richard Crane's resources, his ruthlessness, his willingness to do whatever it took to protect his position. "I promise," he said, hoping it wasn't a lie. "I'll call you later. Stay with Aunt Teresa until I tell you it's safe to come home." After he hung up, Isabella ended her own call and looked at him. "The FBI is opening a formal investigation. The shooting in the garage was caught on traffic cameras. They have evidence of the attack." She smiled grimly. "My uncle miscalculated. He tried to silence me and instead gave the authorities proof that I'm telling the truth. That doesn't mean you're safe. Cornered animals are the most dangerous." "I know, but I'm not alone anymore. I have you. I have the truth. I have the whole world watching." She walked over and took his hand. "We're going to win this, Evan. We're going to make sure my uncle pays for everything he's done." Evan wanted to believe her, but he'd seen too much of the world to think justice was guaranteed. Rich men like Richard Crane rarely faced real consequences. They bought their way out of trouble, or intimidated witnesses, or found legal loopholes that let them escape. But sometimes, just sometimes, they made a mistake. They pushed too hard, got too arrogant, underestimated their opponents. Richard Crane had underestimated Isabella. He thought she'd be easy to discredit, easy to silence, easy to kill. Instead, she'd fought back with everything she had, and she wasn't fighting alone anymore. Outside, the city lights were beginning to glow as evening descended. Somewhere out there, Richard Crane was planning his next move, regrouping, preparing for the final confrontation. The press conference had bought them time, but not safety. The attack in the garage had shown Richard's true nature, but it had also shown his desperation. A desperate man with unlimited resources was perhaps the most dangerous thing in the world. But Evan had survived worse, and he wasn't about to let Isabella face this alone. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The FBI arrived at the plaza at 7 the next morning. 2 agents in dark suits showed their badges to hotel security and were escorted to Isabella's suite. Special Agent Victoria Chen was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. Her partner, Agent Marcus Rodriguez, was younger but carried himself with the same quiet authority. "Ms. Crane, Mr. Cole, thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Agent Chen said as they settled into the suite's sitting area. "We've reviewed the evidence you submitted, and we have some questions." Isabella sat forward, her hands folded in her lap. She'd barely slept, but her voice was steady. "Whatever you need." "Let's start with the shooting yesterday. You claim Richard Crane's men fired at you in an alley behind the Crane Industries building." "It's not a claim. It happened." "We reviewed the traffic camera footage. It shows 2 individuals fleeing across rooftops, but the quality isn't sufficient to make positive identifications. The audio picked up what might be gunshots, but it could also be a car backfiring or construction noise." Evan's stomach sank. "You're saying you can't prove it was us or that we were actually being shot at?" "What I'm saying is that the evidence is circumstantial. Richard Crane has already provided a statement claiming you 2 broke into his office, stole confidential documents, and fled when building security attempted to detain you. He says no one fired any weapons, that his security team was simply trying to prevent corporate espionage." "That's a lie," Isabella said flatly. "His men chased us through that garage with guns. One of them shot at Evan while we were climbing the fire escape." "Did you recover any shell casings? Any physical evidence of gunfire?" "No. We were too busy running for our lives." Agent Chen made a note on her tablet. "What about the documents you claim prove Richard Crane paid Marcus Chen to cause the accident?" "I showed them at the press conference. Wire transfers, emails, Marcus's notebook documenting meetings with my uncle." We're analyzing those documents now. The wire transfers are real, but they could be legitimate business payments, as your uncle claims. The emails came from an account that's been routed through multiple proxy servers, making the origin impossible to verify. And the notebook, she paused. The handwriting matches Marcus Chen's, but there's no way to prove the RC he referenced is Richard Crane specifically. Isabella's face went pale. You're saying you can't prove any of it. I'm saying building a prosecutable case is going to take time. We need to trace the money more thoroughly, interview witnesses, examine Marcus Chen's body for evidence of the paralytic agent you mentioned. These things don't happen overnight. I don't have overnight. My uncle tried to have me killed yesterday. He's not going to stop just because you're investigating him. Which is why we're offering you protective custody. We can place you in a secure location while we continue the investigation. For how long? Weeks? Months? Isabella shook her head. My uncle has unlimited resources and patience. He'll just wait until you run out of budget for protecting me, and then he'll make his move. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. Ms. Crane, we understand your frustration, but right now, the evidence you have raises questions without definitively answering them. Your uncle's lawyers are already claiming you're mentally unstable, that you've fabricated this entire conspiracy because you can't accept that the accident was just that, an accident. Without stronger proof, a jury might believe them. So what do we do? Evan asked. We keep investigating. We follow the money. We interview everyone who knew Marcus Chen. We build the case piece by piece. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. But in the meantime, you need to stay safe and stay visible. The press conference was smart. It made you too high profile to disappear quietly. Keep doing that. Keep the media interested. The more eyes on this story, the harder it is for your uncle to act against you. After the agents left, Isabella stood by the window, staring out at Central Park. They don't believe me. They think I might be crazy, just like my uncle says. They believe something happened. They wouldn't be investigating if they thought you were completely delusional. Evan joined her at the window. But they're right about one thing. We need more evidence, something concrete that can't be explained away or disputed. Like what? We already have the financial records, the notebook, the emails. What else is there? Evan thought back to the night of the crash, replaying every detail in his mind. The limousine sinking into the river. Marcus slumped over the wheel. Isabella unconscious in the back seat. And then, after he'd pulled her out, after the paramedics had arrived, there had been divers in the water recovering Marcus's body. The autopsy, he said suddenly. You said the medical examiner found elevated levels of succinylcholine in Marcus's system. Yes, but they dismissed it as a natural occurrence in drowning victims. What if we get a second opinion? An independent forensic pathologist who specializes in toxicology? Someone who can't be influenced by your uncle? Isabella turned to look at him, hope flickering in her eyes. We'd need access to tissue samples, blood work, the original autopsy materials. Can you get them? Marcus's sister might be able to request them. She's his next of kin. Isabella was already pulling out her phone. If we can prove the succinylcholine levels were artificially elevated, that it couldn't have occurred naturally, then we have proof of murder. She made the call, speaking in rapid, urgent tones. Marcus's sister, a woman named Lisa Chen, had been following the news coverage. She'd believed Isabella from the beginning, had known her brother wouldn't have died from a heart attack. She agreed immediately to request the autopsy materials and consent to an independent examination. It'll take a few days to process the request, Isabella said after hanging up, but she's going to push for expedited handling. She wants answers as much as we do. Good. In the meantime, we stay here, stay public, and wait for your uncle to make a mistake. They didn't have to wait long. That evening, the news broke. Richard Crane had filed a petition in court to have Isabella declared mentally incompetent and place her under conservatorship. The filing claimed she was suffering from post-traumatic psychosis, that she was a danger to herself and potentially others, and that she needed immediate psychiatric intervention. He's trying to have me committed, Isabella said, reading the court documents on her laptop. If the judge grants this, he can lock me away in a psychiatric facility and take control of my shares in the company. Everything I own, everything I am, he'd control all of it. When's the hearing? 3 days. We have 3 days to prove I'm sane and he's a murderer, or I lose everything. Evan called his sister and asked her to keep Maya for a few more days. He called his parole officer and explained the situation as best he could without sounding paranoid. Then he called every contact he had, asking for help, for advice, for anything that might give them an edge. One call went to an old friend from before his conviction, a guy named Tommy who worked in private security and knew people who knew people. Tommy called back 2 hours later with a name, Dr. Patricia Wong, one of the best forensic toxicologists in the country, based out of Columbia University. She testified in dozens of high-profile murder cases and had a reputation for being incorruptible. She doesn't come cheap, Tommy warned. But if anyone can prove that paralytic agent was administered deliberately, it's her. Isabella hired Dr. Wong that night. The doctor agreed to expedite her analysis, understanding the time pressure they were under. Lisa Chen hand-delivered the autopsy materials to Dr. Wong's lab the next morning, and the doctor went to work. Meanwhile, the media circus intensified. The conservatorship hearing became national news. Talking heads on cable television debated whether Isabella was a brave whistleblower or a delusional heiress. Richard Crane gave interviews portraying himself as a concerned uncle trying to help a sick young woman. Isabella countered with her own media appearances, calmly and rationally presenting her evidence, refusing to be painted as unstable. Evan watched it all unfold with growing anxiety. They were running out of time, and Richard Crane was winning the public relations battle. For every person who believed Isabella, there were 2 more who thought she'd lost her mind. On the second day, Dr. Wong called with preliminary findings. The succinylcholine levels in Marcus Chen's system were approximately 4 times higher than what you'd expect to see in a drowning victim, she said, her voice crisp and professional over speakerphone. More significantly, I found injection site markers in the tissue samples from his neck. Someone administered this drug via syringe, probably while he was driving. Can you testify to that in court? Isabella asked. I can and I will. This wasn't a natural occurrence or a side effect of drowning. This was deliberate poisoning. Your driver was murdered, Miss Crane. Isabella closed her eyes, relief and grief washing over her face in equal measure. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. I'm emailing my full report to you and to the FBI right now. This should be more than enough to stop that conservatorship hearing and get a proper murder investigation opened. After the call ended, Isabella sat in silence for a long moment. Then she started to cry, not from fear or frustration, but from the overwhelming weight of finally having proof, of finally being believed. Evan sat beside her and let her cry, his hand on her shoulder, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. They had their evidence. They had their truth. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning. Isabella's legal team filed Dr. Wong's report as evidence at 8 p.m., giving Richard Crane's lawyers less than 12 hours to respond. It was a calculated move designed to throw them off balance, and it worked. That night, Evan's phone rang. Richard Crane's number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him this call would be different from the last one. Mr. Cole. Richard's voice was tight, controlled rage barely contained. You've been very clever. You and my niece. I underestimated you. Is that an apology? It's an acknowledgement. I've spent my entire life building an empire, and you're destroying it with stolen documents and sob stories to the media. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've stopped a murderer. That's what I've done. Marcus Chen was a means to an end, a necessary sacrifice for the greater good of the company. Isabella never understood the business the way I do. She's sentimental, weak, too concerned with ethics to make the hard decisions. Under her leadership, Crane Industries would crumble. So you decided to kill her. I decided to save the company my brother built, to preserve his legacy for future generations. Was I supposed to just stand by and watch her destroy everything? Evan felt cold fury building in his chest. You murdered a good man. You tried to murder your own niece, and you're justifying it with corporate responsibility? I'm explaining it to someone who clearly doesn't understand how the world really works. People like you, Mr. Cole, you live in a fantasy where good triumphs over evil and justice always wins. But that's not reality. Reality is power and money and being willing to do what others won't. Then why are you calling me? To gloat? To threaten me again? To offer you one final deal. The conservatorship hearing is tomorrow. The judge is someone I know well, someone who understands the importance of crane industries to the economy. Dr. Wong's report is concerning, but it's not conclusive proof that I had anything to do with Marcus's death. At best, it proves someone murdered him. It doesn't prove I ordered it. The money trail proves it. The emails prove it. The money trail shows business transactions that can be explained a dozen different ways. The emails came from an untraceable account that anyone could have created. You have suspicions, Mr. Cole, not proof of my personal involvement. And without that proof, I will win tomorrow. The judge will grant the conservatorship, Isabella will be committed for psychiatric evaluation, and this entire unfortunate episode will fade from memory. What's your offer? Convince Isabella to drop the accusations. Admit she was mistaken, that the trauma affected her judgment. In exchange, I'll drop the conservatorship petition. She can keep her shares and her freedom. We'll agree to disagree and run the company as co-equals. And Marcus's murder goes unpunished. The FBI will continue to investigate. If they find real evidence against whoever killed Marcus, that person will face justice. But it won't be me because I'm innocent. Richard's voice turned cold. This is your last chance, Mr. Cole. Take the deal or tomorrow Isabella loses everything and you lose whatever protection her money has been providing you. My patience is exhausted. My mercy is depleted. Choose wisely. I choose Isabella, and I choose the truth. Then you're a fool, and fools don't survive long in my world. The line went dead. Evan told Isabella about the call. She listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. He's right about one thing, she said when he finished. We can't prove he personally ordered the hit. Everything we have is circumstantial. A good lawyer could create reasonable doubt. So what do? We make him confess. Isabella's eyes were hard. He's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. We use that against him. She outlined her plan, and Evan felt his stomach drop. It was risky, borderline insane, and might get them both killed, but it was also the only way to get the proof they needed. Are you sure about this? He asked. No, but I'm sure I won't let him win. She looked at him. I need to know you're with me, all the way to the end, whatever happens. Evan thought about Maya, about the life he'd built after prison, about how much easier it would be to just walk away and let Isabella fight this battle alone. But he thought about Marcus Chen drowning in his car, conscious and paralyzed. He thought about a world where men like Richard Crane face no consequences for their actions. I'm with you, he said. Let's end this. The next morning, they arrived at the courthouse surrounded by media. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Isabella walked through it all with her head high, Evan at her side. Inside, the courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and legal observers. Richard Crane was already seated with his team of lawyers, looking confident and composed. The hearing began with Richard's attorneys presenting their case. They showed medical evaluations, psychological assessments, expert testimony about post-traumatic stress and oxygen deprivation. They painted a picture of a young woman who'd suffered terrible trauma and had constructed an elaborate delusion to cope with it. Then Isabella's team presented Dr. Wong's report. The forensic pathologist took the stand and explained in clear, precise terms how Marcus Chen had been murdered. She showed slides of the injection sites, the elevated toxicology readings, the evidence that made accident impossible. However, Dr. Wong concluded, while I can prove Mr. Chen was murdered, I cannot identify who administered the paralytic agent. That would require additional investigation. Richard's lawyers pounced on that, arguing that while Marcus's death might have been suspicious, there was no evidence connecting their client to it. They suggested Isabella had become fixated on her uncle as a suspect due to old family grudges and her deteriorated mental state. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Patricia Morrison, listened to both sides with an impassive expression. When the presentations were finished, she called for a recess to review the evidence. During the break, Isabella excused herself to use the restroom. Evan followed her into the hallway, concerned. You okay? Perfect. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to someone. Give it 5 minutes. Evan had no idea what she meant until Richard Crane appeared in the hallway, apparently also heading for the restroom. He saw Isabella and changed direction, walking toward her with his lawyers trailing behind. Isabella, please be reasonable, he said, his voice pitched for the nearby reporters to hear. "This doesn't have to continue. We're family. Let me help you. You murdered Marcus. You tried to murder me. And you're going to pay for it. I've done nothing wrong. All I've ever done is try to protect this family and our company." Richard glanced at his lawyers, who nodded encouragingly. "But if you're determined to destroy yourself with these accusations, I can't stop you. Just know that when this is over, when you're receiving the psychiatric care you need, I'll still be here. I'll still love you, even after everything you've put me through." It was a performance, Evan realized. Richard was playing to the reporters, the cameras, building his case as the concerned uncle dealing with a troubled niece. And he was doing it well. That's when Isabella played her trump card. "You called Evan last night," she said clearly. "You offered to drop the conservatorship if I admitted I was wrong about you." Richard's expression flickered. "I reached out to Mr. Cole hoping he might help you see reason, yes. And you told him that Marcus Chen was a means to an end, that his death was a necessary sacrifice for the greater good of the company." The hallway went silent. Every reporter, every camera, focused on Richard. "I said no such thing," Richard replied, but Evan could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Actually, you did." Evan pulled out his phone. "I recorded the entire conversation. Would you like me to play it for everyone?" Richard's face went white. His lawyers stepped forward immediately. "That recording is inadmissible," one of them said. "New York is a one-party consent state, which means it's perfectly legal for me to record my own phone conversations without telling the other party," Evan finished. "Especially when that other party is threatening me and confessing to murder." He pressed play. Richard's voice filled the hallway, clear and damning. "Marcus Chen was a means to an end, a necessary sacrifice for the greater good of the company." The reporters went wild. Questions erupted from every direction. Cameras captured Richard's expression as he realized what had just happened, how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. "That's out of context," he shouted over the chaos. "I was speaking hypothetically, explaining how someone might justify such an action, not admitting to—" "You also said, 'I decided to save the company my brother built,'" Isabella cut in. "You admitted you made the decision. You admitted Marcus was a sacrifice you deemed necessary. That's not hypothetical. That's a confession." The bailiff emerged from the courtroom, shouting for order. Judge Morrison appeared behind him, her expression thunderous. "What is going on out here?" Isabella's lawyer stepped forward, holding up a tablet. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that's directly relevant to this hearing. A recorded phone conversation in which Richard Crane appears to admit to ordering the murder of Marcus Chen." "Objection!" Richard's lawyer shouted. "This is a setup, a manipulation. In my chambers, now." Judge Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Both legal teams, both parties, and that recording. Everyone else. Back to the courtroom, or I'll clear this building." The meeting in chambers lasted 20 minutes. When they emerged, Richard Crane looked like he'd aged 10 years. His lawyers were grim-faced. Judge Morrison returned to the bench and banged her gavel for silence. "Having reviewed the new evidence presented, I'm denying the petition for conservatorship. Ms. Crane appears to be of sound mind and is fully capable of managing her own affairs." She fixed Richard with a hard stare. "Furthermore, I'm ordering the district attorney to open an immediate investigation into the death of Marcus Chen. Mr. Crane, you are advised to retain criminal counsel." The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. Richard's lawyers surrounded him, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Isabella sat perfectly still, her eyes closed, breathing slowly. "We won," Evan said quietly. "We survived," she corrected. "The war isn't over yet." But she was wrong about that. The recording had done more than win the conservatorship hearing. It had destroyed Richard Crane's credibility completely. Within hours, the FBI announced they were upgrading their investigation to focus specifically on Richard as the primary suspect in Marcus Chen's murder. The board of directors at Crane Industries held an emergency meeting and placed Richard on indefinite leave pending the investigation's outcome. By the end of the week, Richard Crane was under arrest. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, attempted kidnapping related to the parking garage incident. His lawyers filed for bail, but the prosecution argued he was a flight risk with unlimited resources. The judge agreed and remanded him to custody. Isabella attended the arraignment, sitting in the gallery with Evan beside her. She watched her uncle in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, as he pleaded not guilty to all charges. When his eyes found hers across the courtroom, she didn't look away. She met his gaze steadily until he was the one who turned aside. "How do you feel?" Evan asked as they left the courthouse. "Empty," she admitted. "I wanted justice, and I got it. But it doesn't bring Marcus back. It doesn't undo what happened." "No, but it stops your uncle from hurting anyone else. That counts for something." The trial took 6 months. The prosecution built their case methodically, tracing the money, interviewing witnesses, presenting the mountain of evidence Isabella and Evan had gathered. Richard's lawyers fought back hard, but the recording was devastating. Combined with Dr. Wong's testimony, Lisa Chen's emotional witness statement, and the forensic financial analysis, the jury deliberated for less than a day, guilty on all counts. Richard Crane was sentenced to 25 years to life. At his age, it was effectively a death sentence. He'd die in prison, the empire he'd tried to protect dissolving around him as Crane Industries restructured under Isabella's leadership. Maya came home the day after the verdict. Evan picked her up from Teresa's and drove her back to their apartment in Washington Heights. She'd grown taller in the months she'd been away, more mature, carrying herself with a confidence he hadn't seen before. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said as they climbed the stairs to their floor. "You did something really brave." "I did something really stupid that happened to work out," he corrected. "Don't get any ideas about jumping into frozen rivers or investigating murderers." "Too late. I already signed up for the debate team. We're investigating corruption in local politics for our spring project." Evan groaned and Maya laughed, the sound echoing in the stairwell like music. Their apartment looked exactly the same as when they'd left it, but somehow everything felt different, lighter, maybe. Like a weight had been lifted that Evan hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. A week later, Isabella invited them to dinner. Not at her penthouse. She'd sold that, she explained. Too many bad memories. Instead, she'd bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, something smaller and warmer and more human-scaled. When Evan and Maya arrived, they found the place still half unpacked, boxes stacked in corners and furniture positioned at odd angles. "Sorry for the mess," Isabella said, greeting them at the door. "I'm still figuring out where everything goes." "It's perfect," Maya said, and somehow Evan knew she was right. They ate dinner around a table Isabella had inherited from her grandfather, eating takeout Thai food straight from the containers because Isabella couldn't find the plates yet. They talked about everything except Richard Crane, everything except murder trials and frozen rivers. They talked about Maya's school, about Isabella's plans for restructuring Crane Industries to focus on sustainable development, about Evan's decision to go back to school and study social work. "I've been thinking," Isabella said over dessert. "I'm starting a foundation. Second chances, job training, support for people trying to rebuild their lives after incarceration. I'd like you to help run it, Evan, if you're interested. I'm a warehouse worker with a criminal record. I'm not qualified to run a foundation. You're someone who understands what it means to need a second chance, someone who's lived through the system and come out the other side. That's exactly the qualification I need." Evan looked at Maya, who was nodding enthusiastically. He looked at Isabella, who was watching him with hope and trust in her eyes. He thought about Marcus Chen, about how one life lost could lead to so many others being saved. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it." The foundation launched 6 months later. It started small, a few programs in New York, a handful of success stories. But it grew quickly, funded by Isabella's careful management of her inheritance and her genuine commitment to the mission. Within 2 years, they'd expanded to 5 cities. Within 5 years, they'd helped thousands of people find jobs, housing, and hope. Evan ran the day-to-day operations, his lived experience giving him credibility with clients and donors alike. He found he was good at it, good at connecting with people who'd been written off by society, good at seeing potential where others saw only problems. Maya grew up involved with the foundation, volunteering in the summers, eventually joining the board when she graduated from college with a degree in social policy. The girl who'd been afraid her father would get himself killed became a woman who fought for justice in her own way. And Isabella poured herself into rebuilding Crane Industries into something her grandfather would have been proud of, a company that valued ethics as much as profits, that measured success in more than just quarterly earnings. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of people who thought she was naive or idealistic, but she proved them wrong, one decision at a time. 3 years after Richard Crane's conviction, on a cold February evening, Evan and Isabella returned to the George Washington Bridge. They stood at the rail where Evan had jumped, looking down at the black water of the Hudson. "I never properly thanked you," Isabella said quietly. "For everything, for saving my life, for believing me when no one else would, for standing with me when it would have been safer to walk away. You thanked me plenty. Not for the thing that mattered most." She turned to face him. "You saw me as a person, not as a billionaire or a victim or a case file. You treated me with respect and dignity when everyone else was trying to decide if I was crazy or just traumatized. That meant everything. You did the same for me, looked past the criminal record, and saw who I was trying to be." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the city reflect on the water. 3 years ago, Evan had jumped from this bridge to save a stranger. In doing so, he'd saved himself, found purpose, found meaning, found a way to turn his own second chance into second chances for others. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't jumped?" Isabella asked. "All the time. You'd be dead. Your uncle would have gotten away with murder, and I'd still be just a warehouse worker going through the motions, trying to survive." "You were never just anything, Evan. You were always someone who saw a person drowning and decided to help, no matter the cost. So were you. You could have taken the easy way out a dozen times, accepted your uncle's explanations, let the authorities handle it, believed you were just traumatized, but you didn't. You fought." "We fought," she corrected. "Together." She was right about that. They'd fought together, and they'd won together, and somewhere along the way they'd become something neither of them had expected. Friends. Real friends, the kind who knew each other's worst moments and best selves, who'd survived things that would have broken most people. "Thank you," Evan said, "for trusting me with your truth. Thank you for being worthy of that trust." They left the bridge and walked back to Evan's car. Tomorrow, the foundation would open a new facility in the Bronx. Next week, Isabella would announce another round of sustainable development initiatives at Crane Industries. Next month, Maya would start her internship with the State Attorney General's office. Life went on. It moved forward, built on the foundation of that one frozen night when a warehouse worker jumped into a river and pulled a drowning woman back to life. Everything that came after, the investigation, the trial, the foundation, the changed lives, all of it flowed from that single moment of choosing to act when everyone else stood watching. Evan had spent years believing his mistakes defined him, that his past would always limit his future. But Isabella had shown him something different. She'd shown him that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing, again and again, to be better than you were before. And so they chose. Every day they chose to fight for people who needed second chances. They chose to believe in justice, even when it seemed impossible. They chose to trust that doing the right thing mattered, even when the cost was high. Because that's what heroes do. Not the kind in movies or comic books, but the real kind. The kind who show up when it's hard, who stand up when it's dangerous, who reach out a hand when someone's drowning. The kind who jump into frozen rivers and refuse to let go, no matter what. Years later, when people asked Evan about that night on the bridge, he'd always say the same thing. He didn't think about it, he just acted. But that wasn't quite true. He'd thought about Maya waiting at home. He'd thought about his parole officer's warnings. He'd thought about all the reasons not to jump, and then he jumped anyway. Because in the end, that's what separates the people who change the world from the people who just watch it happen. The willingness to jump when others hesitate. The courage to act when action is hard. The strength to hold on when every instinct says to let go. Evan Cole jumped into a frozen river to save Isabella Crane's life. In doing so, he saved his own. And together they built something better than either of them could have built alone. A legacy of second chances, of justice served, of lives transformed. The breath he'd given her that night, desperate and life-saving, became the breath of life for thousands of others. The moment that should have killed them both instead became the moment everything changed, and that, in the end, was the real story. Not the conspiracy or the trial or the dramatic confrontation, but two people who found each other in the worst moment of their lives and chose to make something good from it. Two people who proved that sometimes, just sometimes, jumping into the darkness leads to light. The river still flows under the George Washington Bridge, cold and dark and dangerous. But somewhere in the city, that bridge connects. There are people who have jobs because of the foundation Evan and Isabella built. There are families together because someone got a second chance. There are lives saved and futures changed because two people refused to accept that the world had to be the way it was. They jumped. They fought. They won. And the ripples of that single act of courage spread outward, touching lives they'd never meet, changing stories they'd never hear, proving that one person willing to take the leap can change everything. That's the power of a single breath, the power of one choice, the power of refusing to stand by while someone drowns. That's the breath that changed everything.